What's up, listeners? Welcome to Predator versus Movies. I'm Alex.
I'm Groot.
What? What? Holy shit! That's crazy.
Guys, we have a special
That's
guest
awesome.
on today's
Holy shit.
today's episode.
Dude,
And
that is such a coincidence.
because
we're
he is
reviewing-
we're reviewing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and because he is Groot, he can only say 3 words in a particular order.
Groot.
No, stop. So Peter's not here today. He's replaced by Groot. But we also have, as usual,
I'm Aidan.
I was half expecting you to give us another surprise that you were somebody else.
Okay.
I don't know who you would have chosen, but anyways, this is a podcast where we usually discuss and review the latest movie releases, but this week we're going to be doing another throwback episode while we take some time off. So we're going to be discussing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and so we're going to start off with our non-spoiler reviews before diving into a deeper discussion of the film. Then we're going to ask the most important question: would this movie be better if the alien from Predator was in it? Aiden, what is some information about this movie?
It's so jarring that we go right into that. I wasn't even paying attention there. Okay, yeah. So it was written and directed by James Gunn, starring Chris Pratt, Zoe.
Chris Pratt? I didn't even spell it wrong.
Chris Pratt, but you did spell Zoe Saldana. Dave Bautista, Vin
Was in a
Diesel,
rush.
Bradley Cooper, Michael Rooker, Karen Gillan, Palm Clementif, Sylvester Stallone, Kurt Russell. The DOP was Harry Braham probably.
Doing great.
Runtime 2 hours and 17 minutes, and the budget was 200 million American dollars.
Thank
That's
you
a
very
lot of
much. Sorry, what was that, Groot?
That's a lot of money, man. Like 200
Holy
million?
shit! You could speak normally.
Dude, hey. You know, it's just
It's just
my
for the movies
It's,
that you do
it's my
that?
secret talent, actually. You know.
Oh, yeah.
Usually Groots can't talk, but
This is
one
actually
can.
no. Actually, we have Groot the actor, not to be confused
Yeah.
with the character he plays in the movies. So
Yeah.
Groot the actor can speak normally. Anyways, so we're gonna be playing our game, Predacritic. There's a website on the internet called Metacritic where critics' scores of the movies are tabulated out of 100. If it's 60 or above, it's green. If it's 80 or above, it's must see. If it's in the 60 to 45 range, it is yellow. And if it's below that, it's red. We are going to guess where Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 lands in that metric. Now, last week when we did Guardians 1, I did get a tiny sneak peek at what this movie's score is. So I have decided to abstain so that we are completely fair. So it is just between Peter and Aiden this week to guess. And
Let's
who
go.
is going first is Aiden.
Ooh. Okay, I don't know. I'm in a bad position because I don't remember what the first one was. My memory is that bad.
Nice.
We recorded that episode just a few days ago, and I don't remember. So, I don't really have something to measure it by, but I do think that I think this movie is not as good as the first one, and so I think that it will be. But it's not a bad movie. I'm feeling like low 70s. I think like low 70s, maybe high 60s. But I'm not really sure, so I'm actually gonna go 70. I'm gonna go 70 straight on.
Interesting. And Peter?
73.
Okay.
1773.
Yeah, I can't game the system, right? Because only two
Well,
people are guessing.
No, but-
Technically speaking, you should only be guessing 71 or 69. There's no reason to be guessing anything else.
That is true.
If you think
but you have
about it.
already.
Oh my
Peter's not good at gaming the system. Also, I like you just guessed. You didn't have any conversation.
I'm
Yeah,
saving
I like
it,
it.
man. I'm saving it
Yeah,
for the
saving it.
non-spoiler review.
You just went right into it.
Yeah,
So Aiden does win this round. It is a 67.
Okay.
And
Oh,
I
that's
think
low.
I
Wow.
think that's more or less fair, actually.
That's right around where I'd put it.
Yeah, Peter thinks it's low though. So as the winner, Aiden, you get to go first. I have decided we are going to do non-spoiler reviews. I think it just works
Cool.
better.
I agree.
So what did you think about this movie?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the heart and the drive that is present in the first one is still here. Like, it's still clearly people who care a lot about what they're doing. I think the characters are still fleshed out very well. I think the character relationships are like the best part of this movie. However, this movie is nowhere near as tight. It kind of, I remember feeling that the first time I watched it, and I definitely felt it this time. It kind of spirals, like the plot is just not tightly wound. The plot just kind of tight spirals a little bit, and it struggles to balance its like A plot and its B plot. I think that yeah, the conflict should develop a little bit differently than it does. Although I will actually say I think that this movie is generally like better looking than the first one. Although I put a caveat to that, which is that there are some scenes that I think don't look very good at all. I think like that just look very staged. And I noticed a specific trend that I'll get into, but it's like it's a specific type of shot that is always boring in MCU movies, and I don't really understand why. It's like a coverage brain kind of shot. So, yeah, I mean, I still definitely enjoyed this movie. I think there's a lot to get out of it. I'd probably give this 3.5 stars. Maybe 3, but I think 3.5 is fair just because I just enjoy watching this movie. I just like it. So I'd give it 3.5. I probably would recommend it to people. Yeah.
Cool. Peter, what did you think?
So actually, when it comes to rewatch, at least, I enjoy this one much more than the first. I think this one's it's more timeless than the first for me personally. And actually, Aiden, even though you said the plot is less tight, which I absolutely agree, I actually think that's a strength of the movie because the banter between the Guardian members is, I think, a huge strength of this movie, where we already have this sort of family set up, and now we get to see how they interact with each other in a much more natural and character-driven way instead of like focusing a lot more on the backstory of each character, which I thought it was hilarious, always works, and just a joy to watch on the screen. But I personally liked it more than the first one. If you're asking me right now, I think objectively it might not be as good of a movie compared to the first one, but subjectively I think it is. And I always have the couple scenes always get me pretty emotional. I think it's easily 4 out of 5 for me, and I recommend this to everybody. It's a great movie.
Cool. Yeah, I would say that I'm probably closer to Aiden's camp, but maybe somewhere kind of split between you guys. I definitely, having seen these two so close together, I definitely can say that the first one is better for me. I think there's a bit of leeway in terms of like one could probably have preference over the other, and we've displayed that here, but I do think that Guardians 1 has some strengths over Guardians 2. I think it has a stronger tone. I think the tone for this one certainly got a lot goofier, which is something we have seen in some other franchises. I can't remember which one. Was that Thor we were talking about? Where
Thor gets super goofy, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like I actually preferred when things were like really dire, and even when things are supposed to get kind of dire in this movie, you don't really feel it the same as when like Ronan was gonna destroy Xandar in the first one. That being said, this movie makes me like cry a lot more. Like this one destroys me emotionally every time I see it, and like not anywhere close to the first one. Like the first one doesn't do that at all. This one, like just several moments are just so sad in this movie. So props on that. But yeah, I do find the comedy is like really annoying in this one sometimes, which is not a problem I had with the first one. I consistently enjoyed the comedy of the first one, and this one I found more annoying. I think this one does a good job of like developing the relationship between all the Guardians. It's really easy to track all of the different side stories, how each Guardian is developing, and in most cases, like with several characters, they have a plot going, which is interesting. What else can I say about this movie? Oh, the third act is a bit messy and I didn't like it, and the second act is a bit kind of slow and stale as we kind of stay in one spot for a while, but I think that's most of it. Yeah, I don't know. It's all right. It's like I think I would give it a 3.5. Not good enough for a 4 for me, but I think better than a 3. And I think, yeah, so, and of course I would recommend people go see this. I still think this is one of the best of the MCU movies, so. So with that out of the way, I think next for us is our synopsis, right? So we have a
Yeah.
spoiler warning, Aiden.
Pew 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 wee wee.
Oh, a little bit of gun action and a little bit of siren. Okay, a little
Yeah,
bit of
I've
both.
been sprinkling them in the past couple episodes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now because I did get a
Cheated.
sneak at the well, I was actually doing my job at looking for the synopsis or the score, that is. There's been a bit of a mutiny on this podcast, as it were, kind of similar to the film. And I've been forced to do the synopsis. So, you know what? I'll play ball, and it's usually I'm not the loser, so I'll have a taste of the synopsis medicine.
It's an established rule now. So if any of us mess it up, then
That is true.
We all
This
face it.
apparently has happened before, and I vaguely recollect that happening. But okay, so here we go. 3, 2, 1. I will go. Okay, so we start with Kurt Russell is on Earth with Mommy Quill, and he fucks her. Then we go to the Sovereign, and there's a monster attacking, and the Guardians defeat the monster to save the batteries for the Sovereign, who are the gold people, who are really stuck up about genetics. They're basically Nazis. So much Nazis in these films. They leave the Sovereign once they get Nebula from them in return for doing the thing. Rocket steals some batteries. The Sovereign chase them because of it. They crash land the ship after a space battle, and they crash land on a planet. First they're saved from the Sovereign by Ego, and Ego catches up with them on that planet, and he says, Quill, I'm your daddy. Quill and Gamora and Drax go with Kurt Russell, who is Ego, and with his kind of servant Mantis to his planet. Meanwhile, Rocket stays with the ship with Groot, and who is a baby, and Nebula. Rocket and Nebula are found by the Ravagers, who have had a bit of an issue with, kind of internally, and a mutiny happens, and Yondu is overthrown as the leader by Taserface. We also learn that Yondu was kicked out of the Ravager as a larger Ravager group by Sylvester Stallone because he was dealing in kids. On the planet, things happen, and it's eventually revealed, I'm skipping way ahead, that Ego wants to make everything himself. He's been going around the galaxy fucking people and trying to make everything him. Rocket and Yondu escape at some point. This is really hazy. I don't remember what happens at all. And they escape and blow up Taserface, and they go save the Guardians, and they stop Ego. That was brutal. Nebula comes back, and Gamora and their friends, and Yondu dies. Okay, I'm out of time. Does someone want to help fill in the blanks there?
That's pretty much it towards the end. Yeah, I mean, like, once Quill realizes that Ego was the one who actually put the tumor in his mom's head, Quill is like,
Right.
fuck you, Ego, you suck. And then that's when he turns on Ego, because he had previously, like, been kind of groomed by him a little bit.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, then they're fighting. And, yeah, the Sovereign does show up, and they're quickly dealt with. The Sovereign shows up, and then they're all dead in, like, 5 minutes, so it doesn't really
But they're
matter.
not dead because
They're not
were
dead,
Just,
they're just-
remotely
yeah.
piloting ships.
But they are
But yes.
no longer a problem very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. Also, important to note that Eagle's whole plan was to indoctrinate Quill into his idea of he just needs more power to do what he wants, basically. And Quill, because he is his biological son and shares some of his celestial powers, is able to help Ego fulfill his goal to spread his, I don't know, blobbiness across the galaxy.
Yeah, also I guess it's also important to know that by killing Ego, Peter, like, relinquishes, like, any of the power he had from that, so
Also true.
Quill has, like, superpowers for a little bit, but because Ego dies, he doesn't have them anymore.
Yep. Okay, I think that's probably good enough. So we're going to get into our spoiler discussion. Now, usually we start with our favorite part, but just for this movie, I've decided to start with what is the saddest part. This is obviously a subjective question, but I had a tough morning rewatching this, so I thought this would be fun to talk about. Peter, why don't you start? I know you also react similarly to this movie.
Oh my God. This movie got me crying in the theater the first time I saw it. And it didn't have the interstellar effect, which like got me full on crying both times. But I had tears in my eyes, man.
Which part though?
When I was rewatching it. I won't steal the obvious one. I think I'll leave the obvious one to one of you two. But I would talk about when Quill was giving the eulogy. That actually hit me surprisingly hard this time. I think the first time around is when like you realize that Yondu's gonna die. That's when it's like, oh my god, not Yondu. But like this time, actually, it was the eulogy that hit me really hard. And I think like during it's just like it's such a cathartic moment for Quill to realize like, hey, like even though he's not your biological father, even though like you thought he's always been like um like he's threatened to eat you, etc. You know, like in the end, he is the father figure that you've been missing this whole time, and he's right there all along. And also Gamora similarly having like the similar cathartic moment where the person you're trying to find is like right there all along, is very very powerful. Just having like this sort of cathartic moment in the entire group, and yeah, that's when there was my eyes got watery.
I will add on to that scene. What I really like about that scene is how it interweaves the comedy as aspect into it as well. Like Peter's
It's
monologue.
supposed to be the saddest part, man.
No, but what I like about that scene is that
I know, I'm joking. I'm joking. Yeah.
it's a moment of like good tone balancing where like it stays serious and sincere while also like putting a few like jokes that feel like they fit the monologue into what Peter's saying. And that's what I like.
I know. Yeah, I think Drax was like doing some commenting, or was it Rock Africa?
Well, it's also even just what Peter is saying, where I forget exactly. Like he's talking about like David Hasselhoff, and he's talking about like they both killed robots and stuff like that. Like I think it's a well written and well delivered.
Yeah, of course. It's very like we said about the first film. It's very like no moment does it break the consistency of the character. It's always like we see things and we know, okay, it makes sense. It's believable that Star-Lord, Gamora, these people would do these things. So yeah, absolutely agree.
Yeah, it's definitely written. It's a eulogy written in the Star-Lord voice, which is great.
Yes. Yeah.
Aiden, did you have a saddest part?
Not really. I don't find this movie that sad. I in fact find it like kind of uplifting at the end. Like I think it's like a sweet feeling at the end of it. Like
Okay, sorry, I don't mean like saddest, like necessarily like that's the emotion, but like what's if any part makes
I
you
will tell you-
teary-eyed?
no part makes me teary-eyed, I'll say that. But I will say like
Wow.
a part that actually makes me emotional is a very like small. I don't say that to discount it. I think this is like a good emotionally charged movie, but when Sean Gunn's character is witnessing the funeral and you can see like the excitement brimming up inside of him, and then he's just like, yeah, like I love that moment. That was ingrained in my head from like the very beginning. But I just think, yeah, I think that's a great moment.
Yeah, that's one of those few moments where you're like, oh fuck, what's a word? When you're like, maybe nepotism isn't a bad thing. like
Also,
that's,
but
like putting
like
your brother
every
in a movie,
director
but, like,
does that.
Yeah, no, I know, but like also like he's good. I like Sean
Yeah.
Gunn a lot, and he's good
I
at
agree.
what he does. I have a couple parts that we haven't mentioned yet. I scrolled away. First one, like earliest in the movie, is the "Where's Quill" moment, where everyone's like Rocket. They're all on the ship, and only Quill and Yondu are still down in the depths with Ego, and I think first it's Gamora who's like, "Where's Quill?" and Rocket like electrocutes her to keep her safe on the ship. And then Drax is like, "Where's Quill? Where's Quill?" And they're all yelling for their friend. I was like, "No, man, it's too good." Oh man, so that one got me. Did you have any reaction to that moment, either of you?
Yeah, I love that moment. I think it's just like, the fact that it's coming from Rocket out of anyone, Rocket is the one who electrocutes Gamora is sick. and Drax, who's usually like the little silly comedic character, the muscle, caring so much about the guy who's just constantly he roasts all the goddamn time, is just lovely. It's like even though like on the surface they're all bickering, they're all like there's so much drama between them, but like deep down there's just such a strong bond between all of these characters, and that moment is just a perfect showcase of that. So
Yeah.
love
Yeah,
it.
I agree. I think that's a great moment too. I actually do have another part that I think is emotional and great, which is earlier in the movie than that, when Drax and Mantis are sitting on like the steps of the palace, and then Drax, like, who has a very cool demeanor and is just like not revealing much in his face, is just looking out and he's talking about his wife and his daughter, and then like when Mantis touches him and she starts sobbing, like I think that's a great moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I really like that, and it's interesting because it's using character powers to
Yes.
like propel the story, which is really
Yeah.
neat.
Yes, that is really cool. Yeah.
Another one I have is man, Rocket just like destroys me in this movie. And so there's the part after Yondu has died, and they're all like watching the funeral procession and whatnot, and Rocket is like, man, Yondu was like this and this and this, and he's like, he always pushed people away, and he was really mean to people. And sometimes he stole batteries he didn't need. And when he says that, and it's like, and it's so obvious he's actually talking about himself and not Yondu, and that's kind of like his like version of an apology. Man, done, destroys me. It's just like, ugh.
Rocket is so well written. Like, oh my
Yeah.
god, the dialogues they give him, it fits the character. It's funny when it needs to be. It's charming otherwise. And in this moment, it's like just charging up to give you that punch. So Rocket is amazing written. Love Rocket.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Rocket's definitely a high point in this movie for sure.
And I think obviously the most iconic moment from this film that is emotionally charged, but for like I don't think any of us would say maybe it's the most emotionally charged, or maybe Peter was just saving it, is of course Yondu's death scene. Now, Peter, I know you were going to talk about it. Do you want to take us through this one?
Well, I was going to give it to you because I thought you were going to
I've-
talk about it.
I've
But,
talked about it. I've talked about it a couple. So
I really like that scene. I think, like I just love how they were referring to Yondu as Mary Poppins. And
it's a bit
earlier on,
earlier, but yeah.
Yeah. And then, the scene itself is there's only one spacesuit and one jetpack on Rocket. So Rocket gave them both to Yondu, and because Peter's like little helmet thing is broken, so he can't breathe in space, and basically only one of them can live. So in that moment, Yondu gave the suit to Quill, and then Yondu's sort of lifting him up with his jetpack and going out of the atmosphere of Ego. And it's just like it's like both of them don't want each other to die, and like the fact that Peter is so desperate, like he's trying to like rip off the spacesuit and put it on Yondu, but like he realized like he can't. It's just so powerful to see like you have to literally witness a person so close to you, knowing that you can't save them, die in front of you. It's just really well acted from both parties, and definitely gave you the punch when you're watching it. So it's very great. It's a great scene.
Yeah, it's for me. I realized this time like it's a combination of the music, which again is very very good in this movie. The music swells, and I think it does a lot to stir up emotions, but also like Chris Pratt is giving a fantastic performance.
know, yeah.
Yeah.
Which I
So
mean, like
good.
people are quick to hate on him, and I think there's maybe good reason, maybe not, but he just like I think it's undeniable the desperation he shows, and like the agony of that, of like not being able to save someone close to him. And it's also like it's the same as his mom. It's the exact same, where he's trying to save or like he's unable to stop someone from dying. I will say I did notice like this time the spacesuit thing makes no sense.
I know.
Because if you like, how are you supposed to take it off? If you're wearing it and it's like on, like it
You
just
can't take it
doesn't.
off. Yeah.
That's just like it's impossible. Like if you can't take it off, then you can't ever take it off. So he should be wearing that forever. So I don't understand how that works. That's an example of a contrivance, but.
And actually, because this is a rewatch, I started like I know the plot going in. I started to notice a lot more things. Like they literally mentions like when Sylvester Stallone and Yondu were talking, and Contraxia, which is like the I don't know the clubbing fun planet they were at. Sylvester Stallone was like, "Oh, you're not gonna have a Ravager's funeral. You're not gonna have that." So, and then this time around, I was like, "Okay, they're clearly setting that up there."
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't think that's a
obvious,
problem
yeah.
though. I like.
No,
I
no,
mean,
it's not a problem. No.
yeah, I love that moment because, like, you know how I feel about characters saying nonsense words that we don't have any context for. And like, that's why he has one line where it's like, "You will never be lit by the fires of troglodytis into the sea." Like, it's like, and I love
like,
that. I love
yeah.
something like that.
It is not even being ironic here. He actually likes these things.
I love it when characters in sci-fi movies just say nonsense words and we don't know what they mean.
Man, it's just like Blade Runner with the Tears in the Rain monologue. Like part of that is like you've never seen the stargates of Alexia, you know, like whatever. I was gonna say, man, Peter, what were you talking about right before this? I forget. There's actually a couple of things that are like foreshadowing sort of for Yondu's death. So not only do they say like you're never gonna get the funeral, which is I think just like good setup for writing, so that it makes that moment important later. But there's when the mutiny happens, all of the people who are on Yondu's side are killed in the same way Yondu eventually dies. They're sent out in the airlock with no oxygen. And I thought there was one other thing, but also just like setting up the use of the glowy suit by Drax is also just good writing to make sure we know what that is. Yeah. So it's all set up in advance. Now that
we can say it's actually set up in the first Guardians film because Gamora was out in space and she was freezing up.
That's also true. Yeah, I was thinking of that actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people die out in space in these.
I know.
It's
brutal.
Now that we've finished our saddest farts,
Nice.
we can now, that's about the level of the humor in this movie. We can talk about our favorite parts. Do you guys have a part that you really liked?
You guys go first because my brain takes a second to boot up all the time.
I like how Peter's just nodding. He doesn't have an answer. He's just like, yeah, I do. I'll go first. I really like the scene set to Come a Little Bit Closer, that song. I was obsessed with that song for a while after this movie. It's really just like a really great action set piece moment. I didn't care for some of the other ones in this movie, and I think this one's a highlight. I like the imagery of like the bodies raining down is really fun, and the arrow is. I think the arrow is very cool in the first movie, but this is the first one. It's almost like
it's godlike
ballet. No, it's like a dance. Like it's like rhythmic. It's like the ribbon dance. Like it's very artistic and creative. The way it kind of moves around to the music, and they do some fun things in that sequence. Like they turn the lights out, and then the hallway is lit up by the glowing arrow as it kills some people. It cuts the string.
They do the security cam thing.
Yeah, they cuts the string on a ship and the ship crushes some people. I find that kind of funny. I also like the shot of Rocket when he like shoots through a wall. He kills someone through a wall, and then you see the reverse of him through the bullet hole. That's really sick. And I think my favorite part of that is I noticed this time is the song starts normally, but it gets to a point where they've added to it, like there's an orchestral backing to it, like to make it kind of like more cinematic and more intense and exciting. And I was like, oh, that like really sells this moment. It's like super exciting now, kind of like adds a climax to the song that otherwise maybe isn't quite there or isn't as exciting. So that's one of my favorite parts.
I'll say that a lot of my favorite stuff is in when Rocket and Yondu are in jail in general. I think for me, one of the funniest like bits of the movie is when they're trying to get Groot to give them the prototype fin, because I
Yeah.
think like that's a very funny concept, and they actually escalate it like really well. Whereas like at first it's just like little misunderstandings where like Groot doesn't understand what we're talking about, and then it gets to the comical point of like he's dragged an entire heavy metal desk. It's like how could you have thought that that was the thing? And then and then I like that the follow up to that is a very tiny thing, but it's a human toe. It's very funny. There's also I also think it's really funny that when he's given the badge, like I really wish I thought this was the joke, and then it winds up being something else. But like, because it winds up being that he thinks it's a hat and he tries to put it on. But I thought he was gonna get it and then present it as if that was the thing he was supposed to get, which I think is funny.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really funny bit, and then also just the conversations that Yondu and Rocket have in the prison, I think are great.
Yeah, I think that pairing was like really inspired. I don't know what drove Gunn to put those two together, other than just realizing like, oh, these characters are one and the same. But
Yeah.
like, it really sells the movie. It makes this movie like amazing, I think.
I agree, and I think that one of the best written scenes is it's the conversation where where Rocket reveals to what's his face, Yondu. Rocket reveals to Yondu that Peter's with Ego, and prior to that, Yondu is like resigned to his fate, and he's like, I'm not gonna get up. But then once he hears that information, that's when he's like, we need to get out of there. But he doesn't reveal that the reason is because Peter's in danger, because he's too closed off to do that. Like he wouldn't admit that, but that is the reason. And I think that that's a great thing where it's like it's that bit of information that turns him.
Yeah, and I mean, while we're talking about Rocket and Yondu, we might as well segue just into that point briefly, and then we will return to Peter's favorite part, assuming he has one ready for us. But I think it's like I said, it's great that they're paired together, but I think it's cool that Yondu is like this, like a really perfect representation of what Rocket could become if he doesn't change. I always think that having characters represent something like that is always interesting. Like the thread of not changing, I think, is really strong always. So, they're both characters who have had like really troubled childhoods. Like we didn't know this in the first movie, but Yondu, it turns out, was sold into slavery, and like that's where he was found by the Ravagers.
Yeah. They both were made to feel like fundamentally worthless, and so like they don't believe it when anyone loves them. And I think like that's a great thing that's like drawn between them.
Yeah, and they push people away, and sometimes they break the rules or do shitty things to act out so that people will like give them that attention. So like Rocket steals the batteries, that's his whole thing in the movie, and it's kind of suggested that that's why maybe Yondu broke the Ravager code. He dealt with children maybe just so that he could get some of that attention, or maybe he's like, he thinks like, that's the kind of person I am, I'm worthless, so I might as well do something really shitty. And I think that's just like, whoa, really hits you in the feels.
I think they actually discuss it when I think it's when they just arrived at Ego's planet, and Yondu is like, okay, why the fuck did you do that? Why did you make us jump 700 times? And then Rocket was like deflecting, and then Yondu is like, you like people like us, like you are me, people like us, we avoid love because that reminds us of the gaping hole that's in us, like how much love we're missing. Like even as soon as we taste love, we're reminded of the void inside of us, the lack of love that we have. I thought that was really great as well. And honestly, like two of the coolest character in the entire film, to be honest. Rocket just like has the best dialogue. Yondu is just such a cool space dad with the arrow. So amazing pairing. Yeah.
I also think it's kind of interesting that like it's definitely present in the first movie, but I feel like they turned Rocket's mean level up quite a bit, especially at the start of the movie. He's like mean, and I really,
like it.
Well, no, like I like it in the sense that it speaks to his character, right? Like he's found this family, but I think it's that insecurity that he doesn't belong, and so he
Yeah.
feels the need
Oh,
to
that's super
push them
great.
away.
Yeah.
And so he's acting out. He's being meaner than he was initially because he's afraid of like losing them and stuff. Yeah.
No, I agree.
Uh,
I think
That's a sick
that
interpretation.
overall, that relationship is, I think, my favorite overall part of this movie.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Peter, do you have a favorite moment for us?
It's really funny because I was gonna save mine, but then I realized you guys both picked moments I would have chosen.
Uh-oh.
Like the arrow sequence on the Ravager ship, one of my favorite action scenes in the entire film, and I'm just a huge sucker for actions going on alongside background music. I think that's just like the best way action is done, where action and music blends together.
Big fan of
And
Baby
then-
Driver.
Hey, I am a fan of
Bell
Baby Driver. And actually, like you said, Aiden, I find like the prison scene very compelling as well between Rocket and Yondu. I think it's like both a self-discovery moment for both of the characters, and also it's very funny with Baby Groot. Now, if
Yeah.
I have to pick one, I know we want to go into the scene sooner or later, so I will talk about the beginning of the movie. So that's the
Oh, yeah.
title cards. So when they were at the Sovereign planet trying to protect batteries, it's very creative how this title sequence is done. I guess it's not very creative, but I really like it. So you really watch the entire action set piece, not from like a third person or like from a main character that's doing the fighting's perspective. You instead follow Baby Groot as he's traversing around the characters as they're, fighting this gigantic space squid. It's both, I think, like a very creative way to represent action, and also very accurate to the whole Guardians theme. That, like, instead of watching the action, you're watching this wacky little tree walking around trying to not get squished. And also, it's just really cool to see like how the actions is impacting what Baby Groot's doing, and how he has to like what he has to do to hang on and stay on the platform, and just like the action going on in the background. It's creative, and it's also a very fun action scene to watch.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just a lot of fun. It's a really good way to like hook the audience and start on a high note, I think. I like some of my favorite moments from that sequence are like very early on, shit goes awry, and there's something, I don't know what it is, but it's like a giant metal ring and it's on fire and it starts rolling, and it's like the comically like things aren't going well kind of like quick visual gag. I also like when the characters start getting involved and they start like interacting with Groot. So we go from like very close on a tiny Groot to a wide shot with that fits like a whole character. My favorite is the first one with Chris Pratt's Star-Lord when he shows up and he goes, Groot! He notices him, he yells Groot and gets smacked off screen like immediately after. I find that so funny.
Yeah, and I'm very happy they finally explained the feud between Drax and Baby Groot. Because you know how like in the first Guardians there was a post-credit scene where Baby Groot's dancing and Drax is like polishing his blade, and he's just like he glares at Baby Groot just stops, and then goes back to dancing, and then it's the same thing with this one. When Drax is on the ground and looking at Baby Groot stops moving.
It's almost like
continue.
it's almost like it's a callback. It's almost
Oh,
like
yeah.
No, but
they're
I'm glad they explained it. I was
self-referential.
like, Drax never had a problem with Groot. Why is this a problem? And then later on, Drax was like packing up, leaving for Ego. Gamora's like, Drax, why'd you have to pack all these things? He was like, oh, I don't like Baby Groot touching my things. I think that's why they had like a.
Oh, what? I don't remember that at all.
Oh, I don't remember that either.
I think
Yeah.
maybe, but like I just find like I'm happy they finally explained that. I thought that was kind of weird.
Yeah, I hate to
But
be a negative Nelly about this scene, but it's not Predator's advocate because I just believe this.
But you just
like
believe it.
I just don't. I think this scene is conceptually a great idea. I think it's a fun idea. I think there are fun parts of it, but it's just awkward, and I think like I don't think I felt this as strongly in theaters, but I remember feeling it a little bit. So it could be a TV screen thing that I'm now watching it on a TV screen. But I think like so for one thing, this scene feels very staged, and whenever the characters, other characters come into it, like the Chris Pratt thing, I can't watch that without being like, oh, he's being directed right now. Like someone is saying like, okay, the monster's looking at you. Okay, look here, Groot's there, Groot's there. Okay, so you're yelling at Groot. It doesn't even look like he's looking at Groot to me. Like it's like a little off, and then he gets knocked off screen. It's the same thing with Gamora when she's in there. I don't like when Drax falls into it because it's just I don't get the joke there. Like it's like what you're saying, Peter. Like I don't think that is explained. I don't understand why Baby Groot won't dance in front of Drax, other than the thing that Drax says, like, there are two kinds of people in this world, those who dance and those who don't.
Yeah.
But, like, I don't know. I feel like, I don't know. I just don't get why he does that. And I feel like it goes on too long. And, like, I don't know. This scene is just, like, very staged to me. And the whole time watching this, I cannot get it out of my head that they're in a blue screen room, and that's just all it looks like to me.
And honestly, like, I have to give James Gunn credits there. Even though, like, the whole dynamic between Groot and Drax is never explained, but, like, it seems so normal. Like
That's
like,
what it doesn't seem normal to me.
Like, I was like, you know, even though this is not explained, I can totally see this happening between Drax and Groot. Like, Drax is a much more, at least he liked to think he's a much more serious person than you know, a dancing little happy tree. So like,
But
I
why
can
would
totally
Groot
see
care?
that. I don't know, but like I can totally see that interaction. So like it worked in the moment. And like obviously when we were breaking it down and trying to describe these, they sound really ridiculous. But I think you know, that's sort of the whole point of the film. It's a silly ridiculous space odyssey with a bunch of
My problem isn't that it's silly. I just don't think there's an explanation for it. Sorry, I'm jumping the queue though.
That's fine. I will say I do agree with Aiden. Actually, I don't think the Drax Groot thing is particularly funny. Even rewatching the post credit scene from the first movie with the dancing Groot Drax thing, I was like,
wasn't funny. Yeah,
that's the whole thing isn't funny. It's not funny that Groot is dancing and then when Drax glares at him, he stops. Like, I get why that makes sense as a visual gag. It's like, I don't know, dramatic irony or something. Like, we know what Drax doesn't, but it's not in actuality very funny. I do understand the staginess of it all, but I think it kind of, for me at least, it works as like just understanding that this is the title sequence. This is like the only part where it's a little bit like we are doing this for the title sequence.
Yeah.
It's sort of similar to the title sequence from the first one, but I do think that one feels a little less stagey. I would say, like it feels more regular.
That's Quill in the thing.
On more regular.
Yeah, that one feels way more regular to me. Like that feels.
Yeah.
It's
shot very different.
It's shot different. They just feel like they're in, and it's not something I'm mad at because I actually feel like they tried to do a hard thing, which is that they tried to do this like continuous shot of Groot coming around, which I think is like the correct way to do this joke. Like you don't want to cut away from baby Groot dancing along, but I think it just like the stitches, or maybe they're not stitches, but just like the way characters come into the shot just doesn't work for me.
Sure.
That's fair. I have another favorite before we move on. It's a small one.
Actually, I have one thing. This is kind of the Marvel nerd of me, just about this scene. Sorry. They say very clearly that this is an interdimensional monster that they're fighting. Now, that's probably the first time we've heard of an interdimensional or dimensions mentioned in any of the Marvel movies. All the way back in 2017. Do you think we're gonna get a reappearance of one of these guys in
the trailer?
In Secret Wars, and like,
oh fuck! I thought you were talking about Guardians 3.
I thought I saw it in the trailer too. I didn't.
Yeah,
I checked
it's totally
again,
in the trailer.
I didn't see it. I just watched the trailer today and I missed it. But do you think it's going to come back?
Maybe. I had a separate question that's only vaguely related, which is that it's a question about Secret War. This is a tangent, but like So the concept of Secret War that both Kang and the Skrulls, like they're both part of it, like they're both doing
No.
it.
Okay, you're just confused. So there's two different events that you're conflating. They both have the word secret in them, which is why it's
Invasion,
confusing.
yeah.
Secret
Oh,
Invasion is
right. Okay.
Skrulls. Secret Wars is the one where all the different multiverses have been stitched together to form a place called Battle World. Usually not Kang related anyways. Like that's I'm trying to think who that is. It's God Emperor Doom actually. So it's actually more of a
Shit.
Fantastic Four thing. But we don't have them yet, so that's kind of a different issue. But yeah, that hopefully that explains that.
Okay, that does explain it. Thank you.
Peter did want to bring something up though. What was that about?
Yeah, so actually, the other action scene I really liked is the whole action sequence in the forest after it crash landed. I thought that was really, really cool.
With
Um,
Rocket,
Yeah, like there's
I like
this
that scene
one
too.
shot-
Yeah.
There's this one shot where we see the crash ship in the middle, and like we don't see the Ravagers moving in. We just see a bunch of flashlights pointing here and there. Like it's this aerial shot. We're looking from above, and I just thought like that's just such a great way to showcase like them creeping in a visually interesting way instead of just like showing like like you're on the ground, the camera's on the ground, and you see a bunch of people with guns pointing flashlights here and there. So that was really cool. And then also when eventually Rocket's about to get captured, there's a huge standoff. The mutiny's about to happen, and then like this works much better in like a first viewing scenario. But the way they relieve the tension they relieve the tension is instead of like everyone firing at each other, it's literally Nebula shooting Yondu in the head. Like you don't expect it, and but somehow that is so fitting for the Guardians theme. So really like that one, that whole thing.
Yeah, what I'll say about that scene, I like that it's an example of what these movies are really good at, which is showcasing the characters' abilities really well. And I find that a lot of superhero movies like don't do that,
I
like
know,
especially
yeah,
recent
agreed.
MCU. What I like about this is that are seeing that Rocket is clever and he's using like both mechanic skills and just like wit. Like he lures them in and then he's hiding in the trees, and then also like his raccoony abilities, like just like no, I like legitimately,
No, no.
I like that he's like he's a raccoon, so he's utilizing the trees like in tandem with his wit and his smarts, and that's what I really like about this scene.
I'm gonna be the one who plays the negative Nelly on this scene. At some point watching this, I was like, it just occurred to me like I actually don't like this. It feels very like a scene made to like excite the people who like Marvel movies and something that doesn't really fit. It's a kind of like we'll get into it later, but like the difference in tone between the two Guardians movies. This one wouldn't have happened in the first one,
Sure.
because it's very What the fuck is going on? It's very CGI heavy. Oh, Peter is
This whole movie is
posting
very
in the
CGI.
chat. Thanks, Peter, for distracting me.
I
It's
found the squid. I have to let you know.
I did see it. Thank you for that. The squid is in fact in Guardians 3, which I did think it was, but I missed it when I rewatched the trailer this morning. Anyways, yeah, there was just something like the shot where like the anti-gravity bombs are going off and it's like whoa.
I don't like that one,
Whoa.
yeah.
So I didn't like
I don't like
that.
that shot.
And then I really didn't like when there's two guys, like it's at the end right before the whole Ravagers show up, and there's two guys and they're like, ha, you're screwed now, and he runs up and he does one, and that guy gets shot, and then he leaps onto the other one, and he goes do 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 do, and he just like punches him a bunch of times with his tiny raccoon paws, but it sounds like a boxer. I was just like this. It was just a little. It was all a little bit too silly for me. I like the moment where he's jumping on the guys and he's planting like the thing that electrocutes them. I like that part. That part worked for me, but it was maybe too silly for my taste.
I still liked it, yeah.
Fair enough. That kind of leads into one of our points that we had talked about, which is the difference in tone between the two Guardians films. So something that occurred to me was that in the first Guardians film, it's very self-serious The villain is treated very seriously, and he is a very serious threat. There are lots of moments that are like kind of life and death in that first movie, and this movie feels a little bit sillier. And that also is also kind of like how the movie handles comedy. I think the first one does a better job of like slapstick and just character dialogue that is funny, that sounds true to them. And this one is a little bit like they're really going for gags. And I have a list of. I'll stop before I get into my list, but I do have a list of the gags that I was like getting tired of, and I just didn't. The gags were not it for me. Did you guys notice a difference in tone?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, specifically talking to the comedy dialogue, I completely agree that I think the banter in this movie feels very forced as opposed to the first one. Like, especially near the beginning, like the things the characters are saying, where it's like, it just feels like, okay, well, they need to be bantering, they need to be, and so it's like, yeah, it's just a little awkward to watch. And I also think that it is like a more generally lighthearted film. It feels like less is at stake. And I think that's because like literally less is. Like we don't know that the entire universe is at stake until like the very end, which I think is like ego isn't really a threat until the problem, and we'll get into that, but like we just vaguely have the sense that ego's a bad guy until it's revealed, no, I'm gonna destroy everything. Like right at the end, and it's just kind of like whatever. Yeah, it definitely feels like the characters don't believe they're not going to get out of it at any point. Whereas in the first one, it's like they literally have a scene dedicated where they're like, "We are going to die. We are going to go die now." Whereas this one doesn't have that.
No, I think that's
that, to be honest.
That's
I
a
don't
really
think that's a problem, but
that's a really great insight, I think, actually, Aiden, in that like. Yeah, it's the fact that we don't know that there are stakes, and because it's supposed to be like a secret reveal, and if we don't know and the characters don't know there are stakes, then there aren't any. And so how do you have a serious tone? Like I think honestly, like the goofy tone kind of has to carry the film for a bit until we have those stakes to drive things again. So that's actually a really good point. Peter, did you sense any difference between the comedy?
yeah, and I actually for me personally, I think I prefer this version of the comedy a lot more because I think it's a lot more character driven. Like you can tell, it's not that you couldn't in the first one, I guess. It's in this one, it's just significantly louder. Like everyone does it, like
It's definitely louder.
like everyone turns up the volume a bit. You know, like Rock is more mean, like you said. I guess Drax has the whole thing about calling Mantis ugly and stuff like that. But like I really enjoyed that because I think this movie, like you said, is a less serious movie compared to the first one. I absolutely agree. I think it's much more about characters discovering themselves. It's a much more character focused and driven film instead of having like an intergalactic threat compared to the first one. And I actually really appreciate that never once were they in doubt that they were going to get out of it because they have faith within the team. And at the end, what's like, I guess the cost of them getting out is instead of like losing, losing innocent people, civilians, etc., is losing a member of the team, which is more personal and a much higher emotional stake for them compared to just Xandardian citizens. And I really appreciate that.
That same thing is at stake in the first one. Sorry, Alex, you go
though. You're both right. I think the charged emotionalness, that was terrible, of losing a guardian is definitely more at stake here. I think it is in the first one because they do, but I think this one, the fear of that happening is a lot stronger now that they're closer with each other and they know each other more. So it's also like it's a movie, so they put that on display. Like they chose to put scenes and dialogue in there that puts that on display more. I think the first movie does a better job in terms of just like making it clear that there are civilians who are in trouble, and I think the Xandarians being in trouble from the first one's a little bit easier to feel for than the people who are millions of light years away getting attacked by blobs of goo. Like it's like, okay, sure. Like I think the best part of that was the mother and her baby. Like that's a really instinctual one where you can be like, oh no, the mother and her baby. But I think even like the people on Earth is just kind of like, okay, you know.
Well,
Not my DQ. They destroyed my DQ.
no, my thing is that like I think I don't really care about the civilians. I think that it's totally fine for what's at stake to be is the group going to be torn apart and then they have to come together. But that's barely a part of this movie. Like barely. Like there's one scene right near the end where Gamora and Quill argue, and that's it. Like that's the only time where we actually think like, oh, the Guardians might be torn apart by this. And I think like that needs to be more if that is like so it doesn't feel like the universe is really at stake because we are introduced to that too late. It doesn't really feel like the group is at stake because that's also too late and it's also just not strong enough. And so like nothing's at stake. Like not until the very end in the third act, and by then it's like we've gone this whole thing. Like at no point does it feel like the group is going to divide. Even though they are literally in different places, there's always the intention that they're going to come back.
Yeah. I kind of agree and I kind of disagree. I do think that right at the beginning of Act Two, the divide feels the strongest. I think, which is it's unfortunate that it feels strongest there and then doesn't really sustain.
It doesn't
in
escalate
that,
from there.
No, that's what I mean. Like because Rocket and Peter are most at odds then, and that is the moment that I felt like that was like a threat to them staying together. The issue is then they separate, and then like they're already separated. You can't separate more than that.
Right.
And I think maybe what they needed to do was keep having Guardians separate. So
Right.
Rocket's already off on his own. Eventually, Gamora leaves Star-Lord to like have some time on her own, and that's when she meets Nebula. So that's like kind of what the idea was, and so there is a bit of a separating moment, but I think
I think it needs to be earlier though. Sorry to cut you off.
maybe we will get into this later. We have a point where we'll discuss some ideas of how we would change this movie because I always find that fun, but I think maybe if like some of the other Guardians had gone off world, maybe that would feel stronger, not just like I'm gonna go out into a field. And then Drax is just like doing fuck all. I don't know. But,
Yeah.
I do want to circle back. We were talking about tone, and I had the list of gags. And so I just want to explain what the gag issue I have is. So here's the first one. Nebula's "it's not ripe" gag.
I don't like that
funny.
at all. No.
I hate it so much.
No.
Trying to like force a gag and then
It's very random.
it's random and it's obvious that like
Yeah.
you know where the punchline is going before it happens. I don't like the rug gag, which is when the Sovereign appear on Contraxia, where the Ravagers are, and she's gonna hire the Ravagers,
It's not great. Yeah.
and they're pulling the blue carpet, and then it gets stuck, and I'm like, really? This is what
I
we're
prefer
doing?
that to the fruit one though, because that one at least feels like
For real?
like I think the comedy. I don't like that, but the comedy of these people who are so arrogant have this entire carpet lined out for them, and in the shot you see that there's like 1,000 people lined back, like on the thing. Like that's kind of funny, and I think that like there's more potential there. It's more natural,
Yeah.
and there's more potential to build a gag. I just think the gag they chose isn't very funny.
Yo, I disagree.
agree.
I think the fruit one, they overdid it. Like, my problem is not with the gag itself, is with how many times they did it. Like, eventually when Nebula finally got the fruit, and then she buys it, oh, it's not ripe. Like,
But
that's too much.
It's
But I
not
thought
even a
it's-
joke until then. Like that's
Really?
they set
I
it
thought
up just
the-
for that.
I thought it's a joke much earlier on than that. Like, I thought, like, initially when Gamora saying, oh, it's not ripe, you can't eat that, you know? Like, that was okay. But then I loved it when Drax also did that. When Drax is also like, it's not ripe. That's just sort of, like, it's like one of these things where they're subtly showing the bonds that's between the Guardian members, and also you don't expect Drax to partake on a joke like this. So it's sort of that aspect as well. It's surprising to see Drax to tell that joke. I actually found that moment really funny when Drax said, "Don't touch it. It's not right."
I think Drax doubling down on it is kind of funny, but maybe it's the fact that Nebula says the exact same line. Like it should have like maybe what would have been funnier is she takes a bite into it out of like that kind of rebellious spirit, and then just like doesn't say anything, but is like very
Or
clearly like unhappy
like it's
with it.
swallowing really hard, like as if
Yeah.
it's disgusting. Yeah.
It's still quite silly as an idea,
Yeah.
but I do agree with Aiden. I think the rug thing has more potential because the Sovereign are like funny, but it's the fact that they also know that they're funny makes it not funny. And so I
Yeah.
can explain this pretty well in that what is funny in comedy is incongruity. When something treats itself so seriously but is actually stupid, that is funny. But when it is self-aware enough to be laughing, then it kills the incongruity and it's no longer funny. So the fact that the Sovereign are constantly laughing at themselves and like they should never be laughing. They're so self-serious people that
Yeah.
like I don't understand why there's so many scenes where they are laughing at one another. It like I just found like I think the issue is generally in comedy when like if you're watching a comedy film, I don't want the characters to be laughing. I'm laughing at them, and that's what's like it's weird when it makes it seem like the movie is telling me what's supposed to be funny, and it's not. Because you've just been like, hey, look, wasn't that funny? The character is laughing at what just happened. But that's not funny anymore.
It also, yeah, it doesn't make sense. It's just the wrong gag that the thing would get stuck because they're supposed to be
Yeah.
perfect. And so, like, the joke should be in that they're so dedicated to doing these things, and to everyone else, it's like, what the fuck are you guys doing? The joke shouldn't be that, no, they're not perfect. No, they're not pristine. No, they have squeaky carpet roller. Like, that's wrong. It should be something that is more in line with what they actually are.
I agree. Yeah, it's just a dumb gag, but the moment is ripe for it is that moment is ripe, but it's
Yeah.
ripe for a different comedic thing. I think maybe my least favorite joke, not so much a gag, but was the taser face thing. Oh my god, I hate
I don't
like
mind that one as much.
like
Time around. You
What?
liar. You liked it the first time around.
the first time around when I was
Yeah, like-
15. I
Yeah,
liked
it
it when I
was
was
a long time ago.
15, Peter.
Oh
That's
my
crazy. Wow. Jeez, this movie came out like 6 years ago. Like,
Dude, just so
don't hold
jaded
me.
now.
Don't
Oh
hold
my
me to
God.
what I thought 6 years ago. I'm not gonna do the same for you.
Jesus
But
Christ, man.
anyways, Taserface is one of those like things where the comic book movies are kind of now. I'll back up. Whatever. I'll explain it first. So sometimes comic book movies make fun of characters' names, and sometimes people find that annoying. Like when characters were laughing at Doctor Octopus, they're like, "Pff, "Your name's Doctor Octopus? Pff, that's so stupid." And it's like, okay, well, like that's what the thing is. If you're ashamed of it, then why are you doing this at all? Like, just accept the world for what it is,
Yeah.
because it's not funny when. Like, most people don't think Dr. Octopus is a silly name. They're just like, yeah, that's what his fucking name is.
Yeah.
Because
When
that's
I
what
was
it
a
is.
kid, when I was a kid watching Doc Ock, I was like, oh yeah, okay, it's Doc Ock, yeah.
That's his name, yeah.
Like,
Um, So that's an example that's really egregious. I do think Taserface is a different example because, A, it fits Rocket's character very well to make fun of someone for their name, and B, Taserface is not like a character anybody knows or gives a shit about. So it's kind of like, whatever.
it is a dumb name in the context of the world. Like, people aren't named shit like Taserface.
It's very Star-Lord of him.
But like even Star-Lord is less dumb. Like Taserface
Yeah.
is like a dumb name.
It is dumb.
Yeah.
I just found personally that scene is going on forever about like a really dumb thing. So I didn't particularly care for that.
I agree the joke overstays its welcome, but I just think it is I just don't have a big problem with it. I don't think it's super
Okay.
funny, but it's like whatever.
I have a different question.
To be honest,
Yep.
like just one more point on that. Like the whole Taserface thing didn't get me this time, but like when Rocket said scrotum hat, that still got me laughing. You know, I think that's the funnier part of the joke this time around for me personally.
That one didn't get me either. Because that's wavering dangerously close to the James Cameron, like, shut up, knuckle ass. Like,
No, but like that's it's so accurate though. You know what I mean?
No, it's not, because he doesn't wear a hat. Like,
No, I
like, he
think
looks-
he's talking
he
about
looks-
his hair. No.
he looks more like Scrotum Face. Scrotum Face
Yeah.
would have been funnier.
Oh
I don't
my
know where the
God.
hat comes from, but then Scrotum Face is too close to Taser Face, and it's a whole different decent deal.
No.
Here's a question for you
I
guys.
thought that was funny though. Yeah,
Here's a
what's
question for you guys. What is a moment that you did find funny? So we know we didn't like it generally, but are there moments that did work for you?
I think Drax is generally very funny in this movie. I think like
is.
most Drax things are like generally hit. Like, I think even the running gag of like Mantis is ugly. I think like that is actually like a funny thing, and I like
You
when
think
it
that's
comes back.
funny?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's way funnier than the other parts. And I think the moment I like is when he's like, "You are very beautiful on the inside." Like that that's actually a funny callback to the joke, I think.
I agree. Two of the funniest moments that I had written down were Drax moments. One when he's stabbing the beast from the inside at the beginning, the
Yeah,
interdimensional
that
thing.
was
He's
great,
going,
yeah.
ah, making no progress. And then also like the Anulax battery joke where Quill is like,
Yeah, yeah.
like they're Anulax batteries, and immediately after he's like, what are these Harbulary batteries? Like,
Yeah, that actually made me laugh like too hard. Like, I don't know, like something about like the simplicity of just like he just completely like it's not even close to what was said.
it's also one of those tricky things where you have to come up with a funny word, and
Yeah.
Harbulary is perfect.
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah,
how
yeah.
they came up with that, but it works so well. Anulax, not funny. Harbulary being the difference. Oh man, that kills me. Drax is definitely goofier in this movie, but that is the one character where that works for me. Where I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
care if he's goofier. He's great. Peter,
I also-
do you have oh, sorry.
I also do I like when he's laughing at Peter
Yeah.
too. And I think that a lot of it is just from Dave Bautista's performance. Like he's just very like he just does it so perfectly where it's like so over the top how he's pointing and laughing at him. Yeah, and then when Mantis comes in, yeah, I like
Mantis
Drax
joins
is the
in.
funniest. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Great moment. Drax is a gem. He's gonna die though. In Guardians 3, he might die. People
Gonna
listening to
walk
this
off
probably
into
do
the
know.
sunset.
You think? Peter, why don't you tell us? Is there a moment that you found genuinely funny?
I love Drax. Drax is great. I didn't find the Mantis ugly thing that funny this time around, though. I'm pretty sure I laughed really hard at that the first time, but not this time. I actually really like Rocket this time around a lot more. Or at least I noticed Rocket a lot more this time. When they were arguing, when they were flying through the asteroid field, that was really great. Him and Peter. I just find him and Peter's banter being like a highlight of this movie. I don't know if it's necessarily the funniest part of the movie, but I just thought it's A, very fitting for both their characters, and B, just it's so charming to listen to them talk. So
And that's it's so upsetting that they're not together in this movie for almost like the entire time. They're together for a bit. And it's tough because the point of the film is the Guardians do have to separate to become stronger. Like that's the whole concept. But I do agree that Rocket is a really great foil for Quill. Like they just
know.
bounce off of each other really well, which is also strange for a character who is played by a different person in the movie than on set, right? Like that's Sean Gunn who's doing the performance on set. So that's impressive to make that work so well.
And I will say, like, just really quick, circling back to the thing I said where the opening feels staged to me. You notice how, like, Rocket never feels staged? It never feels like they're saying, look at this green tennis ball and say your lines to him. And, like, like, I feel like, and I think that's because someone's performing there, and I feel like no one is performing there with them in the opening sequence.
For Groot.
It feels like they're they're looking at a tennis ball in the sequence.
I see. That's a fair point. And actually, I realized one of my other final points of moments that I found were funny was actually a Peter Quill rocket moment. It's when they're doing the Groot detonator sequence, which in itself is pretty funny.
I like that sequence
and
too.
and Rocket asks Quill if anybody has tape, and they just hold
Yeah.
on Rocket and Groot,
Yeah.
as you can hear in the distance. Quill asking everybody if they have tape.
Yeah.
That's just like that
And
works
the
so well.
The escalation of like when Drax, it's implied that Drax said Scotch tape, and then he's like, "Well, if you didn't have it, then why did you say Scotch tape?"
And dude,
He's-
that
yeah.
joke was so obvious too. Like I totally saw that coming, but I still laughed.
But I think it's so funny.
Yeah,
No,
I know.
it's the implication that Drax says, "Would Scotch tape work?" Like
Yeah.
that is so funny. And he's like, "Yeah, it would. Why would you say that if you don't have it?"
I also
Oh my
also
God.
in that point, I think like Bradley Cooper also like is always very funny delivery as well. Where like the second time that Groot points to the same thing, like he does the exact same thing, and Bradley's like, "No, that's exactly what you just said." I think it's really funny.
Dude,
delivery.
your audio was like peaking or something. We didn't get any
Oh,
of
sorry.
that. That's so funny. Okay. Whew. Okay, we gotta take
I think
it
it's
down.
fine on my Audacity recording.
It probably will be fine. So we're gonna start getting into some of our other points. We've been talking about a lot of stuff so far, but let's talk about directing. So
Sure.
I think that it's interesting. I think this one feels more confident in its directing. I think James Gunn. I think it's clear that James Gunn kind of like has learned a lot from his first Guardians movie. I think the thing that is definitely better is I think the performances are more consistent.
Absolutely.
I think that in the first Guardians movie, there's a couple of moments where I was like, that didn't feel genuine, like a character says something and I didn't believe it. And I don't think that's present at all in this movie. I think the characters are very consistent. So both an improvement in individual performances and in the general direction. But I don't know, like the tone is also the job of the director. So I didn't appreciate that, but I do think that at least in terms of getting performances, I think the directing has improved in this movie.
I also think in terms of coverage, I have kind of ambivalent feelings where it's like on one hand, I actually think some of like the most expressive shots in the MCU are in this movie in particular.
Yeah.
Like namely one of the ones where Peter is just listening to music on the spaceship on the way to Ego. Like that's a good shot. The one where Mantis and Drax are sitting on the steps and it's an extreme wide, and like there's actually like it's a very pretty use of CG. Like this, I think the CG looks great in that scene. But then at the same time, like I pointed out, where almost every two shot is so like lame and feels without purpose in this movie. And I think across the MCU, I always feel that. And like I personally, in my experience, I think two shots are hard because like just having when two characters are just standing facing each other and you just go from the side and it's just like kind of eye level and you're just looking at them, like it's just for me like it is genuinely hard to make that interesting sometimes. But I don't think I think this movie doesn't do a good job of it. So it's like a weird coverage thing, but I would say overall I like the shot design a lot better in this movie. When Gamora and Nebula are fighting, there's a really fun kind of Sam Raimi-ish camera movement where it's like a wide angle that like swoops into both of them as they're facing off, and that's really fun. So yeah, I like a lot of the directing in this, but some of it feels off to me.
I noticed that there's a couple shots. I think what's interesting about this movie is James Gunn goes more for the wide shots than maybe he did in the first
and
one.
I really loved most of the wides actually.
Yeah, so there's the one that you're talking about is actually one of the shots that made it into my document that I have, my Google Doc of screenshots I pull. And so I'm looking at it right now, and I love that shot so much because it's like, not only is it a wide shot, but like Peter, it's like a medium shot in the sense that you only see his torso, and he's just like on like a really small part of the screen. And I think this movie is more colorful, which is really fun. Yeah. He injects a lot of color into it that was kind of lacking in the first film. Also, just looking at the shot that I grabbed, when also in the Gamora Nebula scene, but right at the start when she's on her own, she is framed in the exact same way as Quill is on the ship. Like they're in the same part of the screen, and like that's directing, baby. like really planning your shots to make like send a message. These are characters who feel alone, and I wouldn't be surprised if you try and go through the movie if you find some of the other Guardians are framed similarly. Maybe
They feel alone, but they're linked too. Like it creates a kind of
yeah. So I think that was really cool. Just the wide shots in general, and Ego Ship looks really cool. And they have the famous dolly zoom in this movie when
they do, yeah.
Peter's the reveal
there's something
happens.
weird about it. There's something really, and it's in the eyes, the way the eyes bulge out towards the end of it, and I think it's because they're CG eyes up to a certain point, and then they're real eyes. Like that's my theory, and that's why it's just a little bit off that the eyes come out. Like the way the eyes come out is not following the dolly zoom in the same way that the rest of the face is. That's my theory. I don't know if that's true. That's just what it seems like to me.
It was something weird, but I just figured it was probably like the distortion of the face. Like it gets to a point where his face looks like fairly normal for most of it, and then towards the end, it's definitely like I think his face is getting like squished and like also pulled depth.
Well, yeah, they're going from long to wide. They're doing yeah.
So that's a really good moment, and just like like a moment where the camera movement is evoking what the characters are feling. I also did notice, I forgot you had mentioned this, the Sam Raimi fight thing. I didn't pinpoint it to him, but I had to replay it because I was like, oh, that was really cool. And I noticed that as the camera moves in, they added like a swoosh sound effect.
Yeah.
So it's like swoosh. Yeah. There's actually a couple moments where like the camera seems like it's in world. So there was that. Yeah. And Groot bumps up against the camera in the intro.
Yeah.
He like falls into it, and you hear like a thunk.
Yeah.
Like the sound of him hitting the camera.
There's also in the Gamora Nebula fight. There's another like kind of wide shot of like them kind of silhouetted by the burning ship, and they're kind of like crouched over, tired on the ground. That's a really nice shot too.
Nice stuff. Yeah, Peter, do you have any thoughts on direction or the visuals?
Like visuals, I think it's prettier than the first one, to be honest, just because the location we visit. But when it comes to directing, I think my focus is less so on the camera work. I think it's always been excellent. First one, the shots and the cinematography is great, and this one is amazing as well. But I think like huge prompts on directing when it comes to characters, because some of these emotions that we feel, especially when surrounding Yondu's death, they need to be executed in a certain way where we need to empathize with the character. Otherwise, we will feel not immersed in the moment and it won't work. And the fact that both you and me got sort of sucked into that moment and able to sort of empathize with Quill and also feel Yondu's sacrifice is just fantastic. So
I totally agree.
Really good stuff. Yeah.
Like I do think that the fact that this one makes me bawl, and like at several different moments, not just one moment, as opposed to the Guardians one, where even like at the climax, I don't really cry that much at all. Like maybe I get a little teary eyed for like when it's Peter hold my hand. Like that one like doesn't hit quite as hard as some of the moments in this one. And
I will say,
yep.
I didn't cry at either movie, but I actually did feel upon rewatch more emotional in the first one.
Interesting.
Like in scenes like the scene where it's like you're asking us all to die, like that scene's very emotional for me. And then also when they're holding the Infinity Stone at the end, that scene's very emotional for me too.
It's a good movie, and not to say that one doesn't make me emotional. There is one that hits more for me, but another thing about directing is characters. We have a lot of character interactions in this movie, and I think that's also a strength of the writing of this movie. The first one I have on our list is Gamora and Quill unspoken thing. So yeah, I really like how Gamora and Quill's relationship is explored in this movie. I like that it's not a guaranteed thing like one might assume it was from the first one. It's something that is still not really a sure thing. I wrote down that it was a situationship, which is some kind of common lingo for the youth these days. But I like that they're they call it their unspoken thing because they're both kind of like afraid to admit that they have feelings for one another. And I think that speaks to the greater theme of that we will kind of keep touching on as we continue, but ego versus family and how ego gets in the way of family, ego being like looking out for yourself. And so they're both prioritizing their egos of like, yeah, I'm cool, I don't need you. And they both kind of feel that way and they're afraid to say that they like each other, you know? But it's like the small moments between them where they're like holding hands or like there's a really good moment where they're just kind of like glancing at each other and they don't want to lock eyes. Yeah, I like this romance for the MCU. Like it's not, I don't think there's any romance that is as, well, maybe WandaVision, but
I like it too.
I really
and
like
I
this one, yeah.
while watching it, I was like, damn, it sucks that they fucking killed her. like like and I remember reading something where James Gunn didn't know that was happening until he read it and then he was like, what the fuck, like what? It's like,
Well,
man,
wait, actually,
that sucks.
Did they ever get hardship in Infinity War?
What?
Because you said it was a soft ship, right?
oh, like okay, so they're not like
Did they ever
really
become a
in
thing?
I think maybe in Infinity War they kind of were. Because what I did notice is in the
I
two
don't remember.
Guardians movies, they actually never kiss.
Yeah.
They're close a couple times, but they never do. And I think that's kind of like because they're like the climactic moments is always like we're family, and family
Yeah.
is kind of like stronger than kissing, and it's a little weird. It's kind of like we're family, and then you kiss, and it's like, well, that's kind of weird. So I'm glad that.
Oh
they
no,
don't.
I just think the phrase "family is stronger than kissing" is a fun phrase.
That'll be the quote that I'm remembered for. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they just kiss in Infinity War. I haven't seen it in a while, but
They might. I don't remember. Well, I remember. I do remember that like the reason Peter goes apeshit on Thanos is because Gamora's dead.
Gamora,
But,
yeah. But I do appreciate this sort of like soft romance approach, though. I think it's honestly like more sexy compared to just like, oh, let's kiss, or like I think it's like it's really cute and also really fits their character. Again, on the consistency point, and also it's just like really fresh as well because I don't think this has been done very often, where like there's huge like romantic tension between the two characters and you just never fully ship them.
Well, it's like what people say about modern MCU, where it's just like sexless and like romantic tensionless, and yeah. Whereas like these movies feel like there actually is something there, you know.
yeah, no, I agree.
Agreed.
Do you guys have a character relationship in this movie that you found interesting that we haven't talked about yet?
So we already talked about Yondu and Rocket, and
Yep.
then Peter and Rocket,
We haven't
Drax and
done Peter and
Gamora.
Rocket. We've only done Yondu and Rocket and Gamora and Quill.
We've talked about Peter and Rocket a little bit. We could
Yeah.
dive a little bit deeper into it if you want to. I mean,
Honestly,
Like, I
I
like
said
the-
my piece on that. So
yeah, I think I mostly have two. Like they're both hard headed. You understand where they're coming from. Like obviously they'd butt heads, and I like that. The resolution is like they still can't exactly address it because those characters wouldn't be able to just outright say like, "I love you, Peter." Like they wouldn't say that. And so I like that it's just Rocket going like, and they didn't leave him, and then Peter's like, "Yeah, of course they didn't," and like that's a good moment.
It is really good.
Yeah.
I think those two are the ones who have to drop their egos the most out of the group.
Mm-hmm.
They're like the most hot headed, and that as their closure is so good. I also think it's interesting that like anyone can kind of like sway Peter if they just like forgetting what the phrase is, but like flatter his ego, right? So like Aisha, the gold lady, says something nice about him, and all of a sudden he's like totally forgotten about Gamora, and he's like, yeah, we could fuck for scientific purposes, like, you know, just for science. And that's kind of like also how Ego, the villain, gets him, because he's like like giving him everything he wants, and then he just kind of forgets about Gamora.
Yeah. Well, it's also like I like the line Gamora says where it's like, no, that's a fantasy and this is real, and you're afraid of what's real, so you're turning to fantasy, which I think is like that's a great line, especially for him who in some ways has not progressed past a child because when he was like that was the last time that he received like normal parenting and normal growth was when he was a child. So in some ways he's stuck there.
It's definitely that like Arrested Development thing, and that's why all of his references, and he's quite like a juvenile character. Like
Yeah.
I think back as if I didn't see this movie today when the third act battle he turns into Pac-Man. Like that's what a kid would do, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, any other character relationships that you liked? There's a couple other ones that could bring up.
I don't know. What do you want to do? What do you clearly? Well, I like Gamora.
I'm trying to
Nebula.
lead. Okay.
Like Gamora Nebula. Like I. That's an interesting one because I like. Damn, I actually need to think about this point more. You say what you need to say first.
Sure. Yeah, the Gamora Nebula one is fun. It's that like. I like that they develop what was sort of planted in the first one, but not really explored at all, and how it's these actual siblings who have kind of like they've been evil to each other, and they need to learn to get past that and get past their pasts, their shared past, and start treating each other with respect and like actually like look out for one another instead of looking out for themselves. It's the ego thing again, right? Like they're trying to, it's choosing self-preservation over the preservation of the other person. I also just really like when they save Nebula from the Sovereign and Peter Quill goes, family reunion, yay! Like a little quiet yay. But there's not much more to that point than that. But
Yeah, I don't know that much to say to it either.
okay. Last character interaction I had was Drax and Mantis. That one's mostly played for comedy, but I do think it's interesting that like it still follows the theme where Drax is being a huge dick to Mantis because of like that ego thing. He doesn't want to let her in. He's trying to push her away because it'll stop either of them from hurting or whatever. And so he's in a very comical way being like, oh, you're so hideous, you're ugly, right? But it's still the same thing. He's pushing people away so that he can be safe.
I think he just believes that too, and like he just has to, like he thinks she's hideous, and
yeah. But yeah,
I think that one, Drax and Mantis is unique though, because it's in the case where Drax is pushing Mantis away, and Mantis, because she's never had proper social interaction, believes that is the norm. That's why she's sort of reciprocating in a similar way, or just like agreeing with Drax, instead of like where it's like Peter and Gamora, where like both they're damaged people, they're traumas from the past, so they're pushing each other away because they're personal reasons. So
that is true.
It's
pretty
interesting.
But let's maybe start talking about some of the writing things that we maybe take issue with. So, Aidan, what was one of your bigger ones? We'll start with something that you had.
Yeah, I mean, like my main problem is that So my main problem is that the A plot of this movie, which is Peter and Gamora and Drax on Ego's planet, and we don't know what Ego's intentions are. We don't know what he's doing. Like, that's the A plot of this movie. There's so little that has to happen. It doesn't develop very much to the point where, like, actually not that much of the movie is even dedicated towards it. Like, there are long periods of time where we are not cutting back to it, and we're with Rocket and Yondu and whatever. And that's because, like, it's like nothing happens in it, and then right at the end, like everything that all the beats that should have been more spaced out happened. So like Peter is like seduced or groomed by Ego, and then that leads to Gamora getting mad at him, and then the master plan is revealed. Like those should be way more spaced out than they are. Like think about like the way we come into it is that Gamora convinces Peter to go, in that, but Peter doesn't want to, and so Peter has to be convinced, and Gamora also has to switch, and both of those moments are like they're such quick turns, and they need to be like established earlier. Like I think that from the moment they get there, Ego needs to be like driving a wedge between them, and he isn't. And so like that would make this movie a lot stronger because it's the same thing we're talking about where it doesn't feel like the group is at stake because it like feels like nothing's threatening them till the end. And so yeah, I think that it's fine to not know what the whole master plan is, but we have to start like cluing in like okay, something's very wrong. And obviously we automatically assume that, but we have to have like a semblance of like what that is, I think. I think an interesting thing as well would have been like if Mantis from the beginning seemed like she wanted to tell them something, like she wanted to tell them, but it's not for a long time where she actually does it. Like, yeah, I think right away Gamora should have been suspicious of Mantis, for example. It's weird that like she just sees that she was about to say something and didn't, and that's Gamora's like whole turn, where it's like no, like she should have been suspicious of Mantis from the beginning. So yeah, I think that there just isn't enough development and things just happen too rapidly in that A plot there.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And that's like, Alex has a segment about what we want to change about the movie. That's one thing I want to change. I think, especially when you consider the context where there was this sort of like soft romantic moment between Peter and Gamora where they're sort of like, you know, there's this thing, there's that. And then all of a sudden, the whole scene turns on its head. It's like, oh my God, why are you trying to take this away from me? You're an asshole. Get the fuck out. You know, like there was just zero setup to justify that change, and also it feels a really odd change to occur in a scene like that. So I absolutely agree with you, and I really like the change that you suggest, which is Ego sort of trying to drive the wedge between Peter and his guardians at the very beginning. So
yeah,
love that. No, I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, I think we're all on the same page here. I think the biggest issue with this movie is that once we reach Ego, we just hit a standstill where we are stuck on that planet until the bitter end.
And there's no conflict there for a while.
Yes, you're right. And there's no conflict. So I think I don't know like what you could do to have like like I don't know, an F plot, an E plot, like how many freaking plots there are in this movie, but like something for them to kind of like a fake conflict maybe. You know, like establish like Ego has like a fake conflict to keep Peter there would be maybe something, but
yeah. Like Ego provides a different reason for why he needs Peter there initially, and so yeah, that could work well.
Yeah, but like just before we get into some ideas we have, but the first thing I want to say is one. I also don't like the visuals of it. It's like CGI land. It's giving Quantum Realm is what I wrote.
I completely disagree. I actually really like the way Ego's planet looks. I think it generally looks really cool. It's well designed and it's like pretty colors.
I think it's designed well, but I think just aesthetically it's not something that I take to. I think what does to play Predator's advocate against myself, I will say that like the idea that it's a CGI fake landscape kind of plays into the idea that this is an illusion, in kind of like a meta way. Like this is not a real place, like the Gamora's argument, but Peter.
Well, I also think like that landscape has to be CG. They can't do that practically.
Set design.
The sprawling plains?
Not the sprawling plains,
you can't
know, like it's
like sure, like the like castle and stuff, sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. I personally didn't mind that it's CG at all. I think the problem with Quantum Realm is it lacks identity big time. But like this place
big time.
has a sense of identity. It's like especially when Ego's sort of walking through Peter, it's like, hey, this is my backstory. I'm giving you some context about who I am and how I came to be. It gives the audience a sense that you're in a museum and Ego is sort of narrating through exhibits of himself, and that's just such an amazing feeling. And like it all fits together as well. It's like this really like deep down, very narcissistic person, having this huge grand palace on a planet that's like, crazy shit, like bubble floating in the air, this platform floating around. It like whole thing speaks ego and matches his character, which I thought is super great. Because like the place is hip, right? So
Yeah, stuff's going on in the background. I think that like just to kind of summarize what I was saying, I think that what's weird about this, and this is kind of circling back, is that like this is like a very kind of archetypical story. Like you've seen this thing where like in the sequel they have come together in the previous movie and now their relationship is being tested and the leader is being pulled away from them by some other thing. And I wish I could think of a better example, but the only example I can think of is one of the Bionicle movies.
No, I have a good one. Okay.
Okay, yeah, you go. Yeah.
Dude, it's Empire Strikes Back. Like, it's literally the same, because Luke has to go to Dagobah, and he's separated from the rest of the group.
I don't mean that exactly. I actually mean more like the character is being tempted to, like, almost turn against the group. Like, he's being convinced that the group is bad for them. And, like, it's, like, a thing you've...
Yeah, no,
the only example I can think of is the third Bionicles movie. But I know it's a thing more than that. I feel like they're resisting the idea here. They don't want there to be as much conflict between the Guardians as there needs to be.
Yeah, I don't know any other examples of that particularly, but I can suggest that we can start our suggestion point. So,
sure,
some ideas of like what this movie could have done to kind of like avoid some of those problems that we had, and I had one that I wrote in the review I did some time ago for my rewatch, and I came to it, and at first I wasn't so sure about it, but I've come around on it again. And my idea was that Ego's plan feels weird to me, in that he wants to spread his being across the universe. It feels very like I want to destroy the universe, just with a twist on it, which is always the most boring thing ever, because it's like it's like I can't understand that. Who would do that? Why? Now for a god,
it's also not like it doesn't feel personally tied to the characters, where it's like they had a relationship to like Xandar in the first one, and it's like established. Like I couldn't tell you, it feels like Xandar being at stake feels like it matters in the first one.
Yeah, more than this, where everything feels so impersonal, despite I think it's the idea of scale, when everything is at stake, nothing is at stake, because it's not personal anymore, it's universal. So I've always had a problem with the stakes in this movie, is they're just too big. It's gotten too big for its own good. And so my suggestion is make the stakes incredibly small. Don't threaten the entire universe, because who gives a shit? We're going to do it again in the next two movies, right? Infinity War. Like, why would you do it early? So my idea was that Ego's whole goal should just be to have someone to spend eternity with. And so he's creating progeny to spend time with, and that's all Peter wants. So then his goal should be keep Peter with him forever. Keep him as his son for the rest of eternity. Who poses a threat to that? The Guardians of the Galaxy, because they want to bring him away and spend their lives together elsewhere. And to save people, there's probably a threat that they can try to turn their attention to, and Ego says, no, don't go, stay with me. And it's that challenge of like what Quill wants the most, and I don't know. So that was my idea.
My problem with that is that like, why doesn't Ego just go with them to places and stuff? Like, I don't feel like that doesn't create. Peter doesn't have to choose between Ego and the Guardians in that scenario. I don't think, like, not really. I do think I think there has to be some reason that he needs Peter beside him that is misguided and incorrect according to the morality of the movie. I think it has to be more than just is just lonely, because then he's not even really a villain. Like even though he's been killing it's the same thing where it's if we then find out he's been killing all of them, it's like okay, but he's not gonna kill Peter because he likes Peter, so there's not a like
But he
there's not a
might.
problem there.
Yeah, but
I
if the
felt
if the Guardians
Go
try to
ahead,
bring
yeah.
him away, then he might kill the Guardians, which is something that
But
would
why?
because
No,
they're
like
trying to
it makes
bring
sense
Peter.
though. Like it's like this overbearing father figure where it's like he doesn't
That was
want
the idea.
Peter to leave him, you know. And also early on in the movie, he actually explained that he can't leave his planet for longer periods of time because he needs to come back to his power source.
Yeah, but he can leave
So-
long enough to like go to Earth and like fall in love with a woman. Like he can
That is
leave for
true.
a decent amount of time.
Yeah.
So it's not like I feel like the resolution to that would in that scenario, Ego's not even that bad of a guy, for one thing. And like that he needs to be a worse guy for the movie to work, I think. Like
Well-
he needs to be wrong. It needs to be strictly incorrect for Peter to choose Ego. And in that scenario, it's not necessarily wrong for him to do that.
It would be taking that idea to the extreme of like the super overbearing parent who doesn't allow him to leave and says, "No, I want you all to myself. I don't want to share you with other people." That has been seen in other media. This isn't the first time that villain has been a thing.
I think the only problem with that though is you lose out on the Yondu backstory plot, where you know he sort of feels guilty about sending all the kids towards Ego, towards like their death technically.
You can still keep
And-
the death thing if they're not suited to like what if instead of they don't have the power or like that can be part of it, but like you know Ego just grows tired of them and he
I
doesn't
guess
like
that
them
makes
or
sense,
they don't
'cause,
have
like,
the
you
power
need
to live forever.
Yeah, exactly. You need the power to live forever, anyways. Exactly. Yeah.
Or maybe he wants like I don't know, a godson. He wants like a son to be God with him and
I think in that scenario it works better if people live on Ego. If there's like a group of people that need to be like liberated. Like I think
Okay, yeah.
that's actually
Oh,
like I
dude,
think
that's just Quantumania
is
over again, man.
Quantumania.
Don't do that.
no, but you like that story isn't wrong. Like Quantumania, that's not a terrible idea that like they go in here and then it's not as good in Quantumania because who is Kang to them? Kang is no one. So what like turning on Kang isn't a big deal, whereas turning on his father is a big deal. But like no, Quantumania just executes that terribly. It's not an inherently bad idea.
yeah.
Okay.
Anyways, do you guys have other ideas of how you would fix this plot problem?
I think Aiden just hit the nail in the head, to be honest. Just like Ego tries to drive Peter away from the Guardian
Yeah.
family ASAP. I think that's perfect. That keeps the conflict very contained and also justifies the actions of Peter later on. I think that's just a really great way to execute it. And also it's a way to, like you said, break up the Guardians in the sense that they are separated both in terms of like physically and also emotionally because like the bond is sort of they're losing the bond that's holding them together.
Yeah.
So you would still keep the universal threat then?
I think that's fine. Like it's just a backdrop anyways.
Well-
It's more about like for me personally, I didn't buy into like Ego's whole thing at all. I don't think like in terms of script, they did a good job explaining like why he's doing this in the first place. He's just like, I found meaning, and the meaning is I gotta take over the universe. It's like there's
Yeah,
something
exactly.
missing there.
There's a problem
Well,
with that because it's dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree that there shouldn't be a takeover of the universe thing. Although it is like the reason is that like he never had any family and he doesn't know how to like take care of people or like be a family member. And so like he represents like the opposite of what Peter needs. And so like there is like some reality and like wanting the entire world to just be him is like antithetical to what Peter needs to learn. And so there is something there, but I also agree that it's not interesting that he just wants to take over the universe. Like, and that's why I think like it needs to be like, again, and maybe this is a dumb idea, but something like this, if there are people living on Ego for whatever reason, and he's not and he's doing something wrong. He's not a good leader. He's doing something bad to them. He's whatever. Then there's like then we meet some of these characters and we learn a little bit about them and we have a personal connection to them, and so they have to be saved. Whereas like just random people on random planets, like that just feels like whatever.
Hey, maybe
Even
it can
even if
be
it's on
like
Earth.
it can be like a WandaVision scenario where it's like egos somehow like mess with their heads
Yeah.
to make them
No,
think
actually,
this is-
yes, yeah.
yeah.
Or
Like ego is trapped in there or something like
but
that.
that's
Yeah, that could be
literally
fun.
WandaVision.
he needs more mantises, basically. Like, what if his whole planet, instead of killing his kids, what if his planet was all of his kids?
Indoctrinating them. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, just
maybe.
like
Yeah.
that's kind of scary, you know.
Mm.
And then you have a planet full of Star-Lord's siblings, like half siblings. That's kind of fucked. There are some other issues with the plot, though, not just what we've described. There's I think let's talk about like the big stuff first. So like the third act isn't great either. I do think that it's a lot of like kind of like meaningless things are happening, or like things that are hard for at least me to kind of like care about. I think the third act escalates really nicely in the first film, where it's very clear like don't let the ship reach the surface, and we have to stop Ronan, and like all these very clear outlines. And this time it's like shoot the rocks, and it's like I don't even understand how like
Yeah.
how much firepower do you need to fight rocks?
Yeah, it's like a feudal, like it's just a buying time thing until another thing
Yeah.
can happen. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a lot of the same. A lot of
Yeah.
shooting at rocks, and then the Sovereign come back randomly.
And then they're quickly dealt with. Yeah.
Quickly, so quickly.
Very quickly dealt with. Yeah.
It's a very messy third act.
Although I
think
will
it-
say what I like about the third act is that it is like the point of clearest conflict in the entire movie. So it actually does feel compelled better in some ways for me.
Like I think the third act, the biggest problem with the third act, to be honest, it's too easy. You know what I mean? Like you think like taking down an entire planet is very hard and difficult, but it's literally Mantis putting the threat to sleep when they were cooking up the plan, and then when they're actually executing the plan, oh, we got to have this fight sequence between Peter and Ego, so we got to have this, two godlike dudes going at each other where Groot's planting the bomb. Like it's a little more simplistic compared to the first one for sure, and also like the progression of the battle is less clear compared to the first one, where first one there's clear visual of the Dark Star or something crashing down into Nova, and like that's just an indication of how the battle is going, which is clearly missing in this one. But honestly, like I don't think the battle was a point anyways. I think the third act is literally just setting up for like a huge emotional payoff. Like, like we care about Quill, his family, and Quill had his thing with Yondu. So ultimately, like I think it works for me as like a movie, but like it can definitely be done better.
But it can do that while also like having good third act. It can set up for that and still have a good third act. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a movie can just be good. You know that, right, Peter? Like it doesn't have to sacrifice one thing for another. It can just
No,
be
for
good.
sure.
Yeah, I'm totally forgetting. I think maybe even just like they go to the below the surface area so quickly. Like they just know exactly where to go immediately, and then we're stuck there for quite a long time. And I think maybe just part of the problem is they go too early. Like just have
I agree actually.
Some of the fight should be on the surface and kind of like feudal fighting with Ego as a god, and then realizing, oh, we need to attack him at the source. Like there needs to be that realization.
Yeah.
And
I don't know how you make it so you have to defeat him, but I just think the idea of like he has a core, he has a brain, and we need to blow it up is kind of lame.
Yeah.
Like, and I just think like, something more interesting. But I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know. But yeah.
I do like how they use the harpulary batteries though. Like that's
that's
kind of
nice.
fun
Yeah.
that it ties into it. What else? One thing I like and one thing I don't like about the third act. What are you doing?
don't
doing right
worry
now?
about me.
Okay. I'm worried a little bit. I don't like. I'm a really anti-fan of power tendrils, like the thing that Ego keeps sticking into Quill, I'm just like, that is so stupid. Like, you
Yeah.
see it when there's like mystical thing, like, I'm gonna draw the energy from you by sticking you in the chest with a power tendril. It's just,
Yeah.
I think it speaks to like this general problem of things that I can't relate. Like, I can't relate to this anymore. That's not a
Sure.
threat that I understand, because a power tendril is not a real thing that exists for us. Where some of the stuff in the first movie is a little easier to be like, there's analogs to the real world, I guess.
Sure.
Oh, Infinity Stone? Say less. I'll get it.
I
Next
knew you
door,
were
right?
gonna
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
joke about that, but like something
But
with a
that's
lot of
that's analogous to like a weapon of mass destruction, like a
yeah.
yeah. Like you can understand that. I agree. I just don't know. Yeah, it's a
I
funny
think
thing
you
where
guys
it's
are
like
being a little too picky. I think you
No,
guys are just
no.
questioning too much, to be honest.
no,
Maybe
I
not.
agree. I think that it's not. It doesn't. It's a delicate balance where you should be able to do something that's fantastical and that is completely unrelated, but you have to like ground it in some way. So okay, so for example, he's getting stabbed. That's something you can understand, but he's not wounded by it. Like that, like that's an example of it. Like he's just stabbed through, and then it comes out, and he's fine. And so it's like, if this is something that's stabbing him, then have it stab him.
For
Like,
realsies.
yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that might be part of it. Is just like it doesn't feel real. It feels like a CGI power tendril because it's when it's there, it's real, but when it's gone, nothing happened. Right?
Also, or if it was like, is it draining him? Like, is it like, if he's in it too long, will he
Yeah.
like just like comatose? But we know that's not true because Ego says to him, "I'll just do this to you for 1,000 years." And so it's like, there's no conflict inherent in the action of him being drained other than he's taken out of the count.
yeah.
And so
I
yeah,
guess that makes sense. So like the action doesn't really translate to you. You don't know what the action means.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is that what you guys getting at? Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
The other thing is, with similar issues, is what happens when he gets power tendrilled is the blob. And I'm pretty sure like that's the movie they're referencing with the gray goo stuff on all the different worlds is the Blob, the 1950s horror film. But it's as fun as an homage that may be, it's very like, okay, very
yeah.
gross CGI blob that just aesthetically is like, I don't know why they chose the most boring gray color for that. That seems like an odd choice, given how colorful
Yeah.
Ego is also. Like, and then also just like people
Also,
far
like,
away.
it's-
Well, we kind of talked
it's
about that.
It's like he planted a plant, right? So do something that's like plant-like.
Something planty.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's some plot contrivances in this movie. I don't know if you've caught any, but I can list a few. Ego just like shows up at the start of the movie and like kind of literally is the Deus Ex Machina. And I'll give it a pass only because
Yeah.
he is a god. And that's the point, is the hand of God saves them from the battle, and he is a god, so like maybe that's the point. But he really just like shows up out of the blue, which is
I
I guess like kind of the point, but
I don't mind him saving him there because it actually helps propel the plot forward that he saves them like that. Like, and it's also not the biggest action that these characters need to take. Like, you kind of expect that this is going to go wrong for them. It just kind of has to go wrong for them. And so like, I actually think that they can't really win by themselves in that moment. They have to, this has to establish they are divided, and because Rocket and Quill can't get along, like they're getting into trouble, and so they have to lose. So I actually think it's good that it's not because of them that they don't die there. Like, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah.
It actually works for me that they get bailed out for that reason because of the conflict they have there, the interpersonal one, they shouldn't be able to win by themselves.
fair enough. That makes sense. Some other ones, there's no guards in the Ravager ship who are like,
Yeah.
And then
And then there are.
and then there are. That's what
Yeah.
really bugged me.
Yeah.
Is if for
Yeah.
one scene the guards are suddenly there, and I was like,
Yeah.
why would you even bother putting them there for that scene if they weren't there for any of the other scenes? Like, that was really strange to me. And the last one is just towards the end, the third act, Gamora and Nebula get out of Ego's undersurface because they jump on a podium that takes them to the surface. And it's like,
No, that's sick.
really?
That's a clever use of environment, I guess.
But why
Like,
is it?
why would Ego be doing that?
Think about
That's
it like
Ego.
from a logic perspective. Why would Ego be sending podiums up to the surface? Like, it's not representative. Like if he was actually trying to form a particular part of his body, for example, like if he wanted to make a giant face, let's say. I don't know why he would do that. But if he wanted to form a giant face, he would have to change the topography of his planet and then would have to move parts of his body. Capitalizing on that would make sense. But the podiums are completely random and do not then do anything specific. That is the problem I have with it.
That's
agree.
wild. Because usually I'm the guy that wants everything to be somewhat related or like something going on the screen explained. I actually didn't mind that. I find it so interesting. You have a problem with it. I just think like, hey, like don't like that's not really something I'd question. You know, it's like, okay, it's happening. They're taking advantage of it. It's like boom, up they go. It's a cool little sequence.
Well, that's what I mean. It's a contrivance. It's like
You can also
like,
just slightly tweak that and make it better. Like the thing you just said,
yeah.
Alex, where it's like, if you just have a reason why he's moving the land, then it's fine. But there's no reason for him to do that.
I
I
feel
don't
like
think it's a huge issue, anyways.
No, I
right?
think
Like,
it's-
you have a
I think it's a general problem with this script is that they've written it in such a way where they've gotten themselves into unsolvable problems, and then they give the easiest possible outcome
That's
to
fair.
just
Yeah, that's
move
fair.
forward. So the podiums is, how do we get Gamora and Nebula out of there and make it about them? I don't know, fucking podium. And like all the other ones
I
too.
like that. I like the way you think. Instead of a more creative solution to the problem, they go with the easiest and this sort of Deus Ex scenario where they were saved by the environment, they're saved by Ego, they're saved by that.
Yeah.
No,
and
I
think
agree.
also like it feels like something that we started noticing later is that they rush production, and that was mostly on the more recent films, but we kind of knew that they didn't have a whole lot of script writing time, and I'm wondering if that's showing its head here a little bit. Like if it had another year to develop, would they have fixed some of these script problems? Like were they rushed for production? Is something that I wonder, and maybe we just didn't notice at the time.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any contrivances, but I have one other one, but I'll open it to the floor if you guys have any.
I am usually not on high alert for it because it's not something I like. It's something that I'm generally able to forgive, but in this movie, I found them less forgivable because of like what you said, where it's like why it feels like you put your characters into a corner and now it's like, oh shit, I actually don't know, and I don't know how to get them out of there. And I've been there as a writer where it's like I've written scenarios where it's like I have no idea how the characters are going to solve this problem. And so you just put like a placeholder thing in, but then the placeholder thing just becomes the actual thing, and that's not good.
Yeah. The only other one I have is when they crash land on Bearhurt, and they try to fix the ship by now ultimately it doesn't matter that the ship is fixed or not because it doesn't get fixed and it stays there. So the ship doesn't in the story doesn't actually need to get fixed. They need to start fixing it. That's all that needs to happen. Rocket
They need
needs
to just be split up for some reason.
Yeah, and Rocket needs to start fixing the ship because they intend to come back to it. Now the issue I have is instead of it like being like they've set up a problem. They need to fix the ship. They've crash land on a planet with no people, seemingly. And the answer is just in their hands. Spray foam nanotechnology. Rocket has this like I don't know where the source is, but he just has like basically like one of those like what you have for like washing windows, like a gun that has like a nozzle, and it's
Yeah,
but
like a
he's like
pressurized water gun.
yeah, but instead of pressurized water, it's pressurized nanobots that are just reforming the ship. And I'm like, it's that lack of tactility. Like I don't understand. It makes it more removed from our universe. Like I can't understand just fixing things. It takes away the conflict of like this needs to be fixed when you just have the solution at your fingertips and it's so fucking easy to just spray shit onto the ship and be like there it's fixed, you know?
Yeah,
Where's the
what
work to that?
what I'll say is that it doesn't matter to me for the reasons we listed, which is that it fixing a ship doesn't matter. And I think like it's actually like a fine enough reason for me that like the fact that the shift is broken is a fine enough reason for me for them to split up, and it would be a big problem for me if we dedicated more time to it. But then the next time we're on the planet, it's when the Ravagers attack, and so now like the initial conflict of ship is broken, so we need to stay here transforms into now the Ravagers are after us.
Exactly.
And I think like
I agree.
like that works for me, and so like and I don't mind the nanobots in this case because like we were talking before like the Iron Man suit thing. I don't like that Iron Man suit is like a nanobot thing. That's frustrating. But this is like in Guardians, it's like, yeah, I just accept like this is how they fix it. I accept that it's gonna take a bit of time, enough time for them to be here when the Ravagers attack. Good enough for me because we go right into the Ravager conflict next scene.
Yeah. I do agree that it's not quite as egregious as it is later in the MCU, but you are bringing up the point that I eventually wanted to get to, which is in the MCU, nanobots are just ubiquitous technology that like everyone just seems to have access to, and so most characters' helmets specifically was the thing that was trending on Twitter, are just nanotechnology CGI that disappear when they're unneeded, so we can see the actor's face because they were paid big money to show their faces, and then very quickly just cover it up with CGI. And it's that tactility again that is missing in that I really don't like when you had to in the old days you had to remove your helmet the old-fashioned way by taking it off, and that was a thing, that was an action someone had to do, and that feels real to us. And just you lose it. And so I don't think the Guardians films doing this in this one small scene is what led to that. But I think it's part of a greater issue of nanotechnology just being a quick band-aid for like, let's do something quickly, you know?
Sure, and I think like the suit example is definitely true. Like I remember Black Panther in Civil War versus the first Black Panther movie. Like I love the suit in the Civil War movie, and then the suit doesn't feel like anything in his own movie because it's all like the nanotech shit. Yeah,
that was the saddest thing was how his suit downgrades from the movie he's introduced to in as a side character to his own movie. It's a worse suit. So like that made me so mad. Last part about writing, well, sort of. There's some character monologuing in this. It was based on what you said in the last movie, Aidan, how characters will just suddenly break into their backstory unprompted. I started picking up on it this movie. Did you notice some of the ones this time?
No, and I think I was expecting it to happen this time, so I was just like, okay, whatever. Like when it did happen, but I know I noticed it as well.
There's two scenes that I caught. One is they're both the blue people. So Yondu, when he's in the jail cell, he sits down and then starts monologuing like immediately after entering the jail cell. He's like, I was sold into slavery, and it's like if your thing can start with bad, that means you're not doing a good job as a writer. And the other one for me was Kraglin asks Nebula what she's gonna do with the money, and like that is a genuine question, so it's a little better. It's not completely unprompted, but then she's like hardcore monologuing like, my father used to take me apart, and then ended with a dumb joke.
No,
that's crazy.
no, okay, Peter, let me finish. And then they try to do the joke as a way to like bail themselves out of
Yeah.
bad writing moment. Like they try to play it off as like, oh, she's monologuing as a joke, which is like that. I hate when writers do that, where it's like, but we know we're doing this thing, so it's not a problem. And yeah, that's what that is.
You guys are crazy for thinking that's a problem, because that's just what Nebula is. I think that's like a character moment for me, and I think I buy that moment.
It's
be honest.
it's close to a character moment. I
Why
do
would
think
she
it was
say
a
that
bit
to
much.
Kraglin though? I don't think she gives a fuck about
Well,
Kraglin.
I
She
think-
wouldn't say that.
Well,
She would say it to
because
Gamora.
because she's
For sure.
invested. She's invested in the quest she's about to go on. You know?
No,
And-
if
and
I think
No.
I think if Kraglin asks her that, she tells him to fuck off.
Exactly.
that's it.
Think would Nebula from the first movie do this? And the answer is no. She was throwing people out of planes constantly in the first one and just like yelling at people. So she would literally be like, shut up and leave. She would only open up to Gamora, and she does later. So it's kind of irrelevant that she
Yeah.
does it in that scene. Like she just does it again later. You know? And if we fix this movie by having Gamora leave earlier, you can do that whole thing
Yeah.
and like have that be an actual threat. Anyways, that's all for character monologuing. What did you guys think of Ego? Is Ego a better villain than Ronan was?
I think
much
so,
better. Yeah.
Would
Yeah,
someone
definitely. I
like
think-
to elaborate?
yeah. No, it's like I touched on it earlier where I think like he represents a better antithesis to what Peter needs to learn. Peter needs to choose family, and he needs to choose real over fantasy, and he needs to like understand who his family really is, and Ego is the antithesis of all of that. And so it's like, yeah, it's a lot better. It's better.
And
For
also, this sort of like I really like it when villain has a personal stake in the protagonist. Like they are actually related. So it's like higher stake both for the villain and for the hero, just because like they're related by blood. And also Peter already has this sort of like who is my father? Like I have this missing father figure as a kid. Well, like in this one he used this sort of movie, this moment to identify, actually I wasn't missing that father figure. It's actually Yondu. But then like this sort of like it's more personal, so it is more meaningful as well to both the protagonist and the audience as well, witnessing the relationship unfolds.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you guys. Last point that I had is just about the theme in general. I think this movie maybe has a stronger thematic story than the first one even. I don't know if I like it better per se, but I think more of the things, and this has to do with like the fact that the antagonist is relevant for one, but I think James Gunn has a stronger story that he's trying to tell. Story being
Sure.
like, what is it all about? And so what I picked up on is that, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, is that I think it's about like, you have to put away ego, and which is why it's great that the villain is also ego, in order to become a stronger family. So this idea of like, ego is that like the voice that says like, I'm better than everyone else, or like you can't, like you can only look out for yourself, and you have to kind of like shed that in order to become close with other people. And all the Guardians have a problem of pushing people away, and we've kind of dissected them individually. What else did I have about this? Aiden, you want to jump in while I figure out what I'm
Yeah, I
going to
mean,
say
I'll
next?
say I think it's a great continuation of the themes and the arcs from the first one, where it's learning to serve others rather than being self-serving, and further exploring like why characters are self-serving, even though like being self-serving is actually against their best interest, which is to come together and love each other and be a family. But just like exploring why they're like that, like, and you have that with Yondu and Rocket, not Rondu and Yocket. Yeah, and I think it's a good continuation. I think like it fits it continues the arcs from the first one really well.
Yeah, and I guess this is kind of maybe its own sub-theme under the same heading, but there's like a theme of like bad parents. So you have the sovereign, who are just like very cold and are just trying to create the perfect progeny. They don't really care about any of them, and if you're not perfect, then fuck off. You have Ego, who is obviously like a terrible dad, maybe also cold in his own way, but like does try to foster a relationship, but for his own means. You have Yondu, who is not the ideal dad. He might have even been a little abusive, but he's not the stepdad. He's the dad that stepped up.
Yeah.
And I think what I like most of all, though, is that there's this idea of like, do you have to be your parents, right? So you have these bad parents, but it's more like who are you in spite of that, So is Quill going to be his dad, right? That's the thread of the movie. Is he going to be the same as his dad? Sort of. Same with like Nebula and Gamora are like they have that shared issue of like what their dad did to them. Rocket has his issue of what his scientist, quote unquote, dad did to him. And what I really like is that the music then reflects this in that climactic moment where the song is Fleetwood Mac about break the chain. You want to break that chain of like familial like abuse, and like you have to break that. You have to be good parents. And so the Guardians have to learn to be good parents to their child, Baby Groot, but also like to each other. They have to be good family, right? So that's my little spiel about what I think this movie is all about.
No, I think you're right.
Any final thoughts about the movie? Anything?
I've said my piece.
Cool. Okay, next week, I doth believe that we will have recorded an episode for y'all on the current Guardians of the Galaxy movie, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I guess it's kind of late for us to give our guesses for that movie, seeing as it will have been 2 weeks released when this comes out, but I just hope it's good. I hope we love it.
I hope it's good too.
Yeah.
I hope it's better than this one. Even though I like Guardians 2 a lot, I hope it's better than the second one.
Samers. If you like us, check us out on Instagram and Twitter at PredatorVMovies.
We did not do our titular segment.
Oh my god, I skipped over it. Aidan, do you want to announce our titular segment?
So we do have a titular segment. It is called Predator versus Movies, and this is where we determine if the movie would be better. I almost said better by accident again. Now that it's in my head, it's like it's gonna be a problem.
At least this one is like they will know what we're talking about this time.
Yeah, we determined we determined if this movie would be better if the Predator from the movie Predator was in it. No, it wouldn't.
Probably not.
Dude, what if Predator's like one of his kids?
Oh yeah. That'd be
That
cool.
would be a good spot for it. I don't know. Anything to spice up the Act 2, like, you might find a way, but it doesn't really feel natural for sure.
There's a Ravager faction of Predators.
There you go. There you have it. Yeah, I think that works for me. I did already plug our Twitter and Instagram, but I'll keep plugging away. If you like my thoughts on movies, check me out on Letterboxd at _AlexGordon_. I leave reviews sometimes, but more often shorter, quippy things.
You can also follow me on Letterboxd. That's 810sunny. That's 810SONNY. My name is Wombo. I also leave reviews sometimes. They're generally short little guys, but you might get a longer one sometimes.
Maybe. And Peter, do you have anything to plug?
No, sir.
Thank you.
You
know
what that means?
Father, just want to take it. That's it. You guys know what it means, right?
Yeah, you guys know. At this point, you guys have an idea. Yeah.
I mean, like, just in case if you don't, it does actually kind of mean that you have to leave a review. You're kind of contractually obligated. Give it a 5-star rating. Give it a like, comment. We like hearing comments, and we'll post a comment, and we might even mention it. I should check if we have any comments.
We will definitely mention it.
And leave a review if you like us. It helps us. It helps us grow. And also just tell your friends. It gets more people to listen to our lovely voices. I guess that's it. So until next week, I've been Alex.
I'm Groot.
Oh, you're back.
Totally
Oh, yeah.
forgot. Oh man, I totally forgot who you were
Dude,
this whole
awesome.
time. Nice
Yeah,
callback.
Great. I made it.
Well, just really impressed with Peter right now.
Yeah.
And this was Predator versus Movies. See you next week.
Pew, 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 pew.